Welcome back to yet another tutorial. In this one, we're making a sweater for a boy. It can be customized to any size, and I'm sure you're going to love these. Subscribe and let's get into it. You're going to need the following materials. You'll need 2 hooks. You'll need the 3mm crochet hook and the 4mm. Then you're going to need yarn. This yarn that I'm using is Robin, and it's lightweight. And because it's lightweight, I'll be doubling my strands in order to achieve the medium weight yarn. Then you're going to need a pair of scissors, a measuring tape, some stitch markers, and a darning needle. You're also going to need to take these measurements: the measurement of the shoulders, the chest, the waist, the armhole, and the sleeve length. Now, out of these 3, we're only going to choose the widest one. So I'll take the chest and divide it by 2. So 25 divided by 2, this gives me 12.5. Then the waist, I'll also divide it by 2. So 24 by 2, that is 12. And I'm going to compare the shoulders, the half of the chest and half of the waist, and then I'll pick the largest. So I'm going to pick 13 because this is the biggest out of the 3. Then these ones, will work with them the way they are. We begin with the waistband of the sweater, and we are working 2 separate panels, the front and the back panel, and then we're going to work 2 sleeves, and then we're going to attach them. So we begin with a slip knot, and we are working the waistband for the back panel. I'm going to begin with the back panel. So after the slip knots, we're going to chain 12. After the 12 stitches or the 12 chains, you're going to chain 1 while holding the 12 stitch, then go into that stitch that you're holding, and place a single crochet. Then the next stitch will get another single crochet. The next gets a single crochet, and you're going to place just 1 single crochet into every stitch till you get to the end of this row. And this will be the end of row 1, which should have a total of 12 single crochets. So just go on, work 1 single crochet into every stitch. At the end, make sure that you have 12 single crochets. That's the end of row 1. So we begin row 2 by chaining 1. And because we're working the waistband, we want it to be elastic, we want it to be ribbed. And therefore, instead of working this stitch right here, we'll go to the stitch at the back, to the loop at the back, and we're working in the back loop. So this loop right here is the back loop. So that's why you put your hook through and pull a loop. And then yarn over and complete the single crochet. The next one is in the back loop. We are working the back loops only, so that we get the ribbed effect. Work the back loop of the 3rd stitch, then the back loop of the next stitch, and you're going to work 1 single crochet into all the back loops to the end of row 2. At the end, you should have 12 single crochets. Then we are at the end of row 2, so we chain 1 to begin row 3. Again, we're going to work row 3 in the back loops only. So begin in that first stitch with a back loop single crochet, work a single crochet into the next back loop, work a single crochet into the back loop of the next stitch, and repeat to the end of row 3. Now, after taking my measurements, we've established that I'm working 13 inches, and therefore I'm going to work this waistband until I have 13 inches when my work is slightly stretched. So you'll need to stretch it slightly in order to achieve the waistband that you're working. So at the end of row 3, chain 1 and turn, and continue. We are just repeating row 2 all through till we get the waistband that is appropriate. I've done a total of 50 rows with the ribbed effect, and this is what I have. This is a waistband for a child that is between 8 to 10 years. And if you're working an adult sweater, you might need to go up to 60 or 70 or 80, depending on the size of that person that you're making the sweater for. So at this point, I'm going to measure my waistband and see how far I am. So at this point, I'm at 11 inches without stretching, and I wanted to get to 13. Therefore, I'll just give this a bit of a stretch. You don't need to stretch it too much, just stretch it a little. So this can go up to 15 when stretched well, when you stretch it too much, but we are at 14. And because a sweater does not have to be fitting, like it can have an allowance. So I do not mind it being a bit bigger, and that can apply to your case too. Now at this point, we do not continue using the 3mm crochet hook. We're going to change from the 3mm to the 4mm. The 3mm is for the waistband and the wristband, but then the main part we are working with the 4mm crochet hook. Now the number of rows that you do, ensure that it's an even number, because we're going to be alternating between a single crochet and a double crochet, and we want an even number of rows. Now we begin with the main part. I've already chained one, so I begin with this first stitch, place a single crochet into that first stitch. So we are working on the rows. Each row will get a stitch. So this first row has gotten a stitch. The second row is this one, and that is going to get a double crochet. The third row right here, we place a single crochet. Then on to the next row, we place a double crochet. We are alternating between a single crochet and a double crochet. So next we have a single crochet. The next one will be a double crochet. And because I had a total of 50 stitches, 50 rows, I should have 50 stitches at the end of this first row of the main part of our sweater. So single crochet next, the next a double crochet, and at the end of the row, your last stitch should be a double crochet. So just alternate into each rows until you have your last stitch, which should be a double crochet. So my last stitch goes right here, and I've entered with a double crochet. So that is row 1 done. We chain 1 and turn to begin row 2. So we've ended with a double crochet, but we always start with a single crochet. So that means the stitch that had a double crochet gets a single crochet. The stitch that had a single crochet gets a double crochet. The next one gets a single crochet on top of the double crochet. On top of the previous single crochet, we place a double crochet. Next is a single crochet, and the next stitch is a double crochet. So alternate again to the end of row 2. Where there was a double crochet, place a single crochet. Where there was a single crochet, place a double crochet. I'm in the last stitch where I've already done the single crochet, so I'm going to chain 1 and turn to begin row 3. Again, we begin with a single crochet, and we're going to repeat these rows until we have the desired full length of the sweater that you're working. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the other measurement that you're going to need is the full length. So you're going to alternate with these rows. There's no increase, there's no decrease, just standard 1 stitch into every other stitch, alternating between a single crochet and a double crochet. And so I'm going to work this until I have the full length of the sweater that I'm working. Then I'll come back and show you what to do next after you have your full length. Because I'm working the back panel, then I'm working until I get to the shoulders. Here is my back panel completed. As you can see, that's the waistband, and I have it up to the shoulders. I needed to get a full length of 18 inches, and you're measuring the length without stretching. So when I measure this, it's at 18 inches, which is exactly what I wanted. The 18 inches. Remember that you're not stretching when you're measuring. I did a total of 60 rows to get to the 18 inches. So the 60 rows plus the waistband get me to 18. Now, after you're done with the back panel, you're going to begin with the front panel. And for the front panel, you're going to work it the same way. You're going to begin it the same way with the waistband. Then, instead of working the 60 rows, I'm going to work until I have 50 rows. That is 10 rows remaining. If you're working an adult sweater, work till you have 15 rows remaining. So for a child, you can work until you have 10 remaining. For an adult, work until you have 15 to 20 rows remaining. And once you get to, I'll get to somewhere here, and then once I get there, I'll come back and show you what to do with the front panel. After working 50 rows of the front panel, or whatever number of rows you're doing, depending on the size that you're making, you're going to divide your stitches into two. So what I've done is, my stitches were 50, so I counted 25 from this side and marked the 25th stitch. Then I also marked the 26th. So what I'll do is I'll chain one and turn my work, and then I'm going to move the stitches, 7 stitches from wherever I am. I'll move the stitch markers, that is. So I'm going to count 7 stitches from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then I'm going to mark that 7th stitch. And I'll do the same on the other side, counting from the stitch marker. I'll count another 7 stitches. If you're doing a sweater for an adult, count 10 instead of 7. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to mark the 7th stitch right there. So whatever is right here is the opening at the front of the sweater. And now we're going to work these two sides separately. We're going to work this side and the other side. And because my back panel had a total of 60 rows, and I'm at on my 50th row, I'm going to work 10 more rows to get to 60. So beginning from there, beginning from this point, I'll chain one and turn. Then I'll begin with a single crochet into the first stitch, just like we've been working. Then do a double crochet, followed by a single crochet, a double, till you get to the stitch before the stitch marker. So that stitch you should end with a double crochet, and then we chain one and turn. Then we begin again with a single crochet, and this is my row 2 from this point of separation of the sides of the sweater, and I'm going to do 9 more rows in order to get to 10. The 10 rows should get me to 60 rows, which is the total number of rows that the panel should have. Done with the 10 rows, so at this point I'm going to chain one and cut off the yarn. Then pull through and fasten. Then we're going to attach the yarn from the stitch that is next to the other stitch marker, and we'll work another 10 rows on that other side. So this stitch that is not the stitch on the stitch marker, but the one that is close to it, put the yarn through and pull a loop. Then you're going to chain one, and we're going to go back into that stitch with a single crochet. Make sure that you're reattaching on top of a double crochet, so that you can do the single crochet followed by the double crochet, then followed by a single crochet. And I'm going to do the 10 rows on this other side. I'm done with the 10 rows on the other side, and I've left a long tail for attaching the front panel to the back panel. I should have done that with the other side, but not to worry, we can always get some yarn and attach. So now at this point, I'll get my back panel, and we're going to join them together on the top part of the sweater. I have my 2 panels right here. We have the back and the front panel, and now I'm going to attach the 2 at the top part. And what I've done is, the stitches that I have here are 18, so I've counted 18 on the other panel, the bottom panel or the back panel, and then I've counted 18 on the other side. So I'm going to be joining at those points. What I'm going to do is I'll join from this stitch all the way to this end, and then I'll do the same thing on this other side. So holding my work like this, I'll get the yarn needle or the darning needle and put the yarn through, or the tail that we left hanging, put it through. And now I'll go into that first stitch and onto the stitch that is marked. Then I'll just start weaving. Ensure that each stitch is aligned with the stitch on the other side. So align the stitches, the corresponding stitches on each panel, and just weave, just sew to join or to connect the panels. I've attached to the last stitch, and right there I'm going to make a knot just to secure that place. Then I'm going to hide the tail inside the stitches. So just go into the stitches, in between the stitches, and hide the tail, the remaining tail. So right there, and then cut off whatever remains when you're satisfied that it's completely hidden. Then I'm going to use this and attach the other side. But before then, let me do away with this other tail that is hanging on this side. So just going in through the stitches and hiding the tail at the end. Then I'll cut off whatever remains. So that first part is completely attached. Now you need to attach this other side. So I'll go on attach these two other sides, then I'll come back once I have the two sides attached together. This is what I have after attaching the two sides together. You can open it like that. This is the right side, and then you have the wrong side. And the main part of the sweater is done. Do not attach the sides. We're first going to do the sleeves, and then after we are done doing the sleeves, we'll be able to attach on the sides. I've done one of the sleeves, as you can see. So I just did it as one big panel, and then I'll be attaching the sides of the sleeve once it's attached to the main sweater. So to begin with, we start with the edging or the wristband, and these we're going to work using the 3mm crochet hook. And I began with 28 rows. So these are 28 rows for a child. If you're doing it for an adult, do at least 36 rows for an adult wrist. We begin with a slip knot as usual and a chain of 12. Then you're going to add one more stitch, then go on to the 12th stitch with a single crochet, and we're going to do this waistband the same way we did the very first waistband. This is a wristband. So the same way we did the waistband is the same way you're going to do the wristband. I'll do my 28 rows and I'll come back once I'm done with the 28 rows. Then we can continue from there. After you're done with the wristband, we're going to begin working double crochets going up. And so at this first stitch right here, that's my first row, and so I'm going to chain 3 at that point, and that's going to act as our first double crochet onto this row. So yarn over, go on to the next row and place a double crochet. Onto the next row right here, we place a double crochet, then a double crochet onto the next row. And because I have 28 rows, at the end of this row I should have 28 double crochets. If you had 36 or 40, work the total number of stitches as the rows that you started with on the wrist. So I'm just going to place 1 double crochet onto each row to the end. This is my last stitch and my last row, and that's where I place the 28th double crochet, and that's row 1 of the sleeve done. We chain 3 and turn to begin row 2. In row 2 we're going to start with an increase. There's an increase, then row 3 will be a row with no increase, row 4 will have an increase, row 5 will have no increase, and we'll keep working, increasing. I'll come back and tell you the number of rows that I did with the increase before stopping, because there's a point where we're going to get and we stop increasing the stitches. So let me do an increase in row 2. The chain 3 is our first double crochet, and therefore into the same stitch right there, the same first stitch, we're going to place a double crochet. Then all the other stitches till you get to the last stitch will have 1 double crochet, and the last stitch will get 2. So the first and the last stitch get 2 double crochets for that increase in row 2. At the end of row 2 I'll have 30 double crochets. The last stitch goes on top of the first chain 3 that we did. So onto the third chain of that chain stitch, place a double crochet, and then yarn over and place another double crochet into that same stitch, and that's row 2 done. We begin row 3 with a chain 3, but you're not increasing in row 3, so every stitch gets a double crochet. So yarn over, do not go into the first stitch, go into the second one with a double crochet and place 1 double crochet in all the stitches. At the end, your last stitch should be on top of the chain 3 stitch. Make sure that you do not miss any stitch. So at the end of row 3 I'm going to have 30 double crochets, just like I had in row 2. Remember, the last stitch is on top of this chain 3 stitch onto the third chain, the last double crochet in row 3. Chain 3 and turn to begin row 4. Row 4 is an increase row, so therefore we're going to have 2 stitches at the beginning and 2 stitches at the end. So into this same stitch, place a double crochet. Then the next stitch will just get 1 double crochet, and all the other stitches at the end work 2 double crochets into that last stitch. At the end I have my 2 double crochets, so I'll chain 3 and turn to begin row 5, and we are not increasing in row 5, we're just working 1 double crochet into every stitch. Then row 6 will be an increase, row 8, 10, all the even rows will be increased rows. But then you're going to increase until you get the length of your armhole multiplied by 2. So mine was 7, and at this point 7 times 2 should be 14. At this point I'm at 8. We're not stretched. If I give this a bit of a stretch, I'll get to around 10 inches, and I want to work like this until I get to 14, which is 7 multiplied by 2. The length of an adult armhole is 9 inches, and therefore if you're working a sweater for an adult, you're going to increase in the even rows until this length right here is 9 times 2, which is 18 inches. So let me go on, make my increases or my rows, and then I'll come back once I've gotten the length of my armhole. My last increase is in row 12, and at this point I've achieved my armhole length multiplied by 2, and so from this point till I get the length of the sleeve that I want, which is 15 inches. This is the length, and you measure the length without stretching. It's at 16, it's actually 16 inches. So until I get a length of 16 inches, I'm going to be working with just 1 double crochet into every stitch. No more increase from this point. My 2 sleeves are now done, and now I'm going to attach them to the main part of the sweater. So I'll just get my sweater and make sure it's on the inside out. Then I'm going to pin the sleeves at these points. I'll get some stitch markers, count the stitches and divide them by 2. Then the part that will be the middle, I'll attach it to the shoulder part of the sweater, and I'll do the same to the other side. So let me do that. So this is how I pin the main part and the sleeve together. This is the sleeve right here. I've gotten the middle part of the sleeve and I've pinned it together with this part of the shoulder. Then I've counted 17 rows on this side and pinned the end of the sleeve on that side. Then you count again 17 rows on the other side, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side of the sweater. We attach the other sleeve right here. So my stitches are 40 actually. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20. That is the middle part of my sleeve. So I put the stitch marker there and pin it to the middle part of the shoulder right here. Then because I counted 17 rows on the other side, I'll do the same to this other side. So I'll get another stitch marker, place my work like this, put the stitch marker through the last stitch right there, and then I'll count 17 stitches, 17 rows actually, 17 rows. So this is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 and 8. So right here, that's where my 17th row is. So I'll pin with the stitch marker, pin it together, pin the two sides together, and then I'll get another stitch marker and do the same. I have my yarn here together with the yarn needle, so I'm going to put the needle through this first stitch right here, and I don't need this stitch marker, so I'll pull it out, pull this through. Then I'm going to get this tail that is here and tie it together with that tail of the yarn that I'm using to sew these two parts together. Just put a knot. Then when I'm sewing this part, I'll work over the tails just to hide them. So just ensure that you're holding your work in such a way that it's well aligned. Just align it well and sew all the way till you get to the last stitch marker. So I'm at the end. I remove that stitch marker and put the last stitch right there, attach, and then I'm going to put a knot, just knot at that point. Then I'll hide the tail inside the stitches. So just put the hook through the stitches to hide that tail. And once you're done with this, you're going to attach the other sleeve the same way we've attached this one. Both of my sleeves are attached. As you can see, this is one of the sleeves and this is the other sleeve. So now I'm going to fold my work like this. You want to ensure that your work is well aligned, and I'm going to pin with the stitch markers right here at the armpits. Then I'll also do a stitch marker at the end right here. Then I'll do the same on the other side, pin with a stitch marker at the bottom part of the sweater. You need the stitch markers in order to ensure that your work is well aligned. Pin right there, and do the same with these other armpits. Then now we're going now to crochet these parts, to sew these parts together all the way from the wrist coming down all the way down to the bottom of the sweater. Get the wrist part and put the yarn needle through the first stitch on the both panels like this. Put it through, and I'm going to tie it together with this like I did with the other part. Just put a knot. Then I'll sew over the tail, over the tails. And you just want to ensure that the stitch on this side is aligned to the stitch on the other side. So go into the second stitch and to the second stitch on the other side, and so join them together like this. Do the same to the third stitch. Onto the fourth. Then continue joining the corresponding stitches together. You're going to join these together all the way till you get to the armpit and continue all the way down to the bottom of the sweater right here. So let me do that. I'll join both sides, then I'll come back and show you how it will be looking like after I'm done sewing the ends together or the panels together. After you're done attaching the sleeves and these other parts like I have, you're going to turn your sweater to the right side, and we're going to work the ribbing on the neck part. So this is what we have, the sleeves attached. We're going to do the ribbing on the neck part of the sweater. So I'm going to get my yarn, and I'm going to reattach the yarn right here on this stitch. These stitches that we left at the center right here, we're going to attach onto the first stitch on this side, on the right side. So I'll put my hook through the back loop of that stitch, then get my yarn and put it through. I'm working the ribbing on the neck part with the 4mm crochet hook instead of the 3. Then I'll chain 1, go into that same back loop with a single crochet. Then the second stitch, we also place a single crochet in the back loop. Same case applies to all the stitches that are in that middle part of the front panel of the sweater. So one single crochet into each of the back loops. you should get a total of, I left a total of 14. If you're working an adult, you should have a total of 20. That is if you're working an adult sweater. And I'm working over this tail just to hide it inside the stitches. So 1 single crochet in the back loops. That's my last stitch, and so we are going to slip stitch onto this side. So on the first row we slip stitch once. We are working on the rows. Then onto this stitch right here we slip stitch again. That is the second slip stitch. Then turn your work like this. Then we're going to work single crochets in the back loops again of the stitches that we've already worked. This is row 2 of the ribbon. Just 1 single crochet in the back loop of each of the stitches till you get to where we started. So I've just done my last slip single crochet in the back loop. So we chain 1 and turn our work. Again we work in the back loops for every stitch, 1 single crochet. That's my last stitch. Now to complete this row, we slip stitch in the next gap. So we had slip stitched here. We have this gap right here. Do a slip stitch. Then do a slip stitch into the next gap and turn. Then again, we do slip stitches, single crochets in the back loop. Make sure that you maintain the same number of double crochets. So if your double crochet with the single crochets, sorry. So if your single crochets were 14 when you started, all the rows should have 14 single crochets. If they were 20, all your rows should have 20 single crochets in the back loops of each stitch. This is my row 4 of the ribbon. I'm at the end, do a single crochet, chain 1 and turn. We begin row 5 of the ribbon with a single crochet in the back loop of every stitch. At the end, slip stitch into the next gap. So this is where we started. So we go into the next gap with a slip stitch and a slip stitch in the next gap. Then we're going to turn and do row 6 of the ribbon. So this is basically what you're going to do all round. So you're going to work the ribbon all around the neck part till you get to this end, and I'll meet you here. I'm done working the ribbon on the neck all the way around to this point, and I've cut off the yarn and left a tail that I'm going to use right here. I'll put the darning needle through, and I'm going to attach this part to this stitch right here. So into the first stitch, and the first stitch on this part that is hanging, we attach. Then the second stitch with the second, the third with the third. So we're just going to sew these points up to this end. On the last stitch, we're going to make a knot. Then you're going to weave in this tail inside the stitches just to hide it. Now at this point, now we are completely done with the neck part. We're completely done with the sweater. You can wear the sweater and then fold it like this. So that's how the sweater will be looking like. So thank you so much for sticking around and for watching the tutorial to the end. If you like the tutorial, do not forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell to get notified, like and comment. When you recreate this, kindly tag me onto your posts on Instagram or on TikTok.